Hello everyone, and welcome to this video on the Python programming language. So in this video, we'll dive into writing code that leverages natural language processing or NLP techniques to analyze the sentiment of stock market headlines. We'll visualize the results to gain insights, and by analyzing the sentiment of these headlines, we'll aim to identify, extract, and quantify the emotional tone reflected in the stock market headlines. Also, you can get all the code and the data set used in this video on Patreon at patreon.com/computerscience. And I will leave a link for that in the description below. All right, so now I'm currently on Google's website. It is called colab.research.google.com, and I'm on it because it makes it easy to get started programming. So if you're going to code along with me, then go to this website and log in using your Google account to get started writing your Python code. All right, so first I'm going to go ahead and click on File, then click on New Notebook in Drive, and this will open up a new tab for me, and it will also create a cell for me. Now in this cell, I'm going to type pip install Vader sentiment to install the Vader sentiment package, and I'm running it by clicking that button on the left, and this will let me know if I made any mistakes, and it should run that cell for me. Okay. So it looks like it's running it and the package has been successfully installed. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and click this code button in the top left to create a new cell. And now in this cell, I'm going to import the libraries that I plan on using for this program. So I'm going to import pandas as PD. I'm going to import numpy as NP. And then from TextBlob, I'm going to import TextBlob. And I'm just going to tab over because Google has given me a few suggestions here. So the next thing that I'm going to import is RE, which is short for regular expressions. And we're going to use that to clean up our data set. And then from Vader sentiment, we're going to import the sentiment intensity analyzer. So the the sentiment intensity analyzer and the text blob are going to be the main two parts of this program that we're going to be using to get the sentiment of our data set. All right. Next, I'm going to import matplotlib.pyplot SPLT. So I'm just going to tap that over. And I'm also going to import plotly.express as px. Okay. So that will help us with our charts. So let's go ahead and run this cell. Hopefully everything is good. And it looks like it is. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new cell. Now in this cell, I'm going to load the data set. And to do that, I'm going to use Google's library. So from google.colab, I'm going to import files. And then I'm going to type files.upload, left parentheses and right parentheses. And I'm going to run this cell. And now it allows me to choose files to open. So I'm going to click on this choose files, and I'm going to choose that stock market headlines.csv file. Okay. So this is the file that I just now uploaded, stock_market_headlines.csv. Again, if you want this data set, I will have it on my Patreon, and that will be at patreon.com/computerscience. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new cell now. And in this cell, we are going to read in that data set and store it to a variable. So let's just go ahead and put store the data into a variable. And I'm going to create a variable called df and set it equal to pd.read_csv. And I'm going to input the name of that data set that was just now uploaded, which is called stock_market_headlines.csv. And then I'm going to show the last 3 rows of data. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show the last 5 rows of data. And to do that, just type df.tail and then input the number 5, and that should do it. So let's go ahead and run that cell. And now we can see the last 5 rows of data. So we can see that this headline has startups starting to compete with big tech for, and then ... So there's some more text after that, but Python is stopping us from seeing all the text right now, right? And that's okay because all the text is there. And the next headline says U.S. small business confidence extends decline. And then we have an I and dot, dot, dot. And let's see, we have Coinbase registers with Indian Financial Watch, dot, dot, dot. And best savings interest rates today, March 11th. And then the two, dot, dot, dot. CD rates today, March 11th, 2025, locking up to, dot, 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 dot. Okay. So we have these headlines. We can see that we have about 100 and, I'm just going to just say 140 or so rows of data of headlines. And so these are all recent headlines that I gathered a couple of days ago. And you can see that it does need some cleanup, right? We want to get rid of some of these parentheses, some of these commas. So we will end up doing that later on. So let's go ahead and create a new cell by clicking that code button in the top left. And now I'm going to convert the headline column to a list of strings. So let's put that here, convert the headline column to a list of strings. All right, to do that, I'm going to create a variable called headlines. I'm going to set it equal to df headline, and that's with a capital H, and then put dot to list, left parentheses, right parentheses. Okay, and then that should do the conversion for me. So now I should have a list of these headlines instead of a data frame. So let's go ahead and run this cell, and let's create a new cell. All right, so this will allow me to basically loop through the data set a little bit easier and append some of the data to other lists. Okay, so let's go ahead and clean the data. All right, so I'm going to create a variable called clean underscore headlines, and this will be set to an empty list. So we're setting clean underscore headlines to an empty list, and we're going to be appending some of the text to this clean headlines later on. All right, so it's empty for now, but of course we're going to add some text to this clean headlines list. All right, so next let's loop through our headline or loop through each headline. So for I in range, 0 to the length of headlines, we are going to remove some unwanted characters. So first here I'm going to put remove unwanted characters, and I'm going to make that a capital R. And so here's where we're going to use regular expressions. I'm going to type clean underscore headlines dot append, and I'm going to put in re dot sub. So we're going to use that re dot sub function, and we are going to put v and then square bracket left parentheses right parentheses, and then a single quote or apostrophe. And if we see this pattern, then we're going to replace it with an empty string. So we're just going to put 2 single quotes there, and then we need to tell it what headline to do this on. So that's going to be headlines at position I. Okay, so right now, this is the first time that we're going through the loop. So this would be the first headline. So I will be equal to 0 if this was the first time that we're going through the loop. Okay, now what am I doing here? Well, this here matches the letter B followed by one or more occurrences of either an open parentheses, a closing parentheses, or an apostrophe. And I'm actually not too great with regular expressions, so hopefully it does exactly what I say it does. All right, and of course that's to remove characters from the headline like artifacts of data processing or encoding. Okay, so next let's go ahead and remove some more. Let's remove some more characters. Remove more unwanted characters. All right, so now I'm going to set clean underscore headlines at position I equal to re.sub. I like what's here. I just tabbed over. We're going to change a few things like the regular expression here. So I'm going to come up here, highlight all this, copy using Control C, come down here, paste it using Control V, and change just a few things. So instead of the single quote there, I want double quotes. And you can see that it messes up the code a little bit. So we're going to change these double quotes on the end to single quotes. Okay. And now this should be very, very similar to the above, where this matches the letter B followed by one or more occurrences of either an open parentheses, a closing parentheses, or a double quote. Okay. And I'm sure there's a better way to do this than what I'm doing right now. All right. So next, let's remove apostrophes. So I'm going to do clean underscore headlines at position I. And there might be some redundancy in all this, but oh well. Hopefully it cleans the data. So re.sub, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a backslash here and then an apostrophe. Okay. So this right here will allow us to remove apostrophes. So we're going to replace that with a empty string. And of course, this will be in clean underscore headlines at position I. Okay, I think that looks good. So here we are removing apostrophes. Alrighty. And last but most certainly not least, we're going to remove all non-numeric, non-alpha numeric characters, except for space. Okay. And I'm just going to make that a capital. All right, so I'm going to take what we have up here. I'm just going to highlight it, copy using Control C, come down here and paste it using Control V, and then just change a few things. So here in the regular expression, we're going to put, well, let me think actually. In this regular expression, we're going to put R, then apostrophe, then a square bracket, and then the up character, and then a backslash W, that's a lowercase w, and a backslash S. And that should do it. So the up character tells the expression to match the following. The backslash W is all alphanumeric characters, and backslash S is any white space character like spaces or tabs. So I think this is going to work. I'm hoping that it does. And let's go back up here and let's put remove unwanted characters from the headline, like artifacts of data processing or in encoding. And I'm just going to highlight this, copy using Control C, and come here and paste it using Control V. So hopefully all this is doing what I commented as it's supposed to be doing. And let's go ahead and run this. And hopefully this cleans the data. All right, let's go ahead and create a new cell now. Okay, so now we have our clean headlines function, and we have our clean headlines in our clean headlines list. I said clean headlines function. I meant to say we have our clean headlines cell, not function. This is our clean headlines cell, and we've cleaned the data. It's all in our clean headlines list. Okay, so excuse me from saying it was a function. It's not a function. It's just a cell. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the clean headlines to the data set. So I'm going to create a new column in the data set that we already have. It's going to be called clean underscore headlines, and we're going to set it equal to our clean underscore headlines list. All right, so just like Google had suggested there. And then I want to show the data. So I'm going to show the last 3 rows of data. So I'm going to type df.tail, and I'm going to put in the number 3, and let's go ahead and run this. All right, and now we can see the last 3 rows of data. And if you look from our original data set, which has the headline column, if you look at the text, you can see that we have a comma here, and then we have our parentheses, but that is gone over here. All right, so we can see that the comma here is also going over here. So our list, our clean headlines list or clean headlines column looks pretty good. I think we cleaned the data like we wanted to. So I'm going to create a new cell. And now in this cell, I'm going to create custom words with their corresponding sentiment scores. And we're going to use this later. So to be used later with the sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, so let's go ahead and create those custom words. So I'm going to create a variable called custom underscore words, left curly brace and right curly brace. I'm going to press enter. And actually, I need to put custom words equal left curly brace and right curly brace. All right, press enter. So I'm going to put a few words here like crash, and that will be a negative sentiment score. So I'm going to put negative here. And then I'm just going to put an arbitrary number like negative 3.0. So this right here is very, very subjective, right? And let's see here. Let's put slump. So if we see slump, it's going to be negative 3.0. And then soar will be 3.0 because that's positive. So I'm not going to put the negative sign there. And then I'm just going to keep giving them all these 3.0 values. Okay. And I like what Google suggested there. Rise, fall, dip. Oh, I should have just tabbed over. Oh, well, there we go. Rise, fall, and dip. I'm going to tab over. And now we have those. I want something a little bit more neutral. So I'm going to put in stable. So I'm going to put 0.0 if it's neutral. And I think you get the gist. You can add more if you want to, or you can remove some, or you can not add it at all. But for now, these are the custom words that we're going to be using. Let's go ahead and run this cell. Let's create a new cell. And now in this cell, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two functions, one to get the subjectivity, the other to get the polarity. And we're going to do this using TextBlob. All right, so here I'm going to create a function to get the subjectivity using subjectivity and polarity using TextBlob. Okay, so here we go. We're going to get the subjectivity. So I'm going to create a function. It's going to be called get subjectivity. All right, and it's going to take in some text. And I should let you know that subjectivity measures how subjective or objective a piece of text is. So subjectivity scores range from 0 to 1. A score of 0 indicates that the text is objective, and a score of 1 indicates that text is subjective. Okay? So here, all we're going to do is return TextBlob, just like what Google has here. It's going to be TextBlob. It's going to input some text, and then we're going to type .sentiment.subjectivity. So I'm just tabbing that over, and now we have our subjectivity. Oh, and it gave us our polarity. So here it created a function called getPolarity. We're taking in some text, and it's returning TextBlob text.sentiment.polarity. Okay, so what's polarity? Well, polarity polarity measures the sentiment expressed in the text on a scale from -1 to 1, specifically the degree to which the text is positive, negative, or neutral. Okay, so I think this is all we wanted to do in this cell. Let's go ahead and run this cell. Let's create a new one. And now I'm going to create two new columns. One's going to be called subjectivity. The other one will be called polarity. And we're going to add this to our data set. All right, so let's create these columns. Subjectivity. Well, Google has a good suggestion here, so I'm just going to tab over. And I'm going to explain to you what Google gave us. So here we are creating 2 new columns, one called subjectivity and the other polarity. Okay, so what did Google do here? So we created our column called subjectivity to our DF data frame, and we're setting it equal to our clean headlines, and we're applying our function called get subjectivity. So the function get subjectivity is taking in the clean headlines as text to get the subjectivity of the clean headlines. And then similarly, same thing for polarity. We're creating a polarity column in our DF data frame, and it will hold values for the polarity of the clean headlines. All right, so let's go ahead and run this, and let's create a new cell. And you know what? Actually, let's go back to this cell here, and let's show the data. Show the last 5 rows of data. So I'm going to type df.tail. We're going to put in 5 so you can kind of see what the data looks like now. Let's run this. Okay, so now you can see we have headline. That's our original data, right? Our original column. Then we have clean headlines, which is the clean text, and then the subjectivity and the polarity using TextBlob. All right, so now let's go back down here to this new column. And now we're going to create a function to use the sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, so I'm going to call this function get SIA. We're going to put in some text, and SIA is short for sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to initialize the sentiment intensity analyzer. So I'm going to create a variable called SIA, and I'm going to set it equal to sentiment intensity analyzer, and then put left parentheses and right parentheses. So this here initializes the sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, next I'm going to add the custom words to the lexicon, and this will be the custom words that we created earlier. So just type sia.lexicon and then .update, and then we're going to put in our custom underscore words. Okay, so this is when those custom words come into play. And then we're going to get the sentiment scores. So sentiment will equal SIA dot polarity underscore scores text. So I'm just going to tab over. Okay, and Google added this line here, but I don't want it. So next I'm going to just return sentiment. Okay, and let me add a comment here. So here we're just creating a function to get the sentiment scores using sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, and what are we returning? We're returning the sentiment, but more specifically, we are going to be returning the sentiment scores, which will return a set of 4 scores, and those scores being compound, neg, new, and pause, which is short for the compound score, the negative score, the neutral score, and the positive score. Okay, and a compound score is a normalized weighted composite score that provides an overall sentiment rating between -1 to 1. Okay, so that's all we're going to be doing here. Well, that's what we're returning here. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's create a new cell. And now let's get those sentiment scores. Okay. So I'm going to create a variable called compound and set it equal to an empty list. I'm going to create a variable called neg, set it equal to an empty list. A variable called pos, set it equal to an empty list. And a variable called new and set it equal to an empty list. And then a variable called SIA and initialize it to be 0 or set it equal to 0. All right, so what are we doing here? Again, we're going to get the sentiment scores for each headline from the sentiment intensity analyzer. So I just created these lists here to store those sentiment scores, right? I said there's 4 scores, and here are the 4 lists that we're going to be using to store those scores. All right, so let's go ahead and look through the data. So for I in range 0 to the length of our data set, and here I'm just going to put df, clean underscore headline. So I'm just going to tab over here. So I like Google's suggestion. So we're going to loop through our clean headlines. And then we're going to set SIA equal to our function get SIA. All right. And we're going to input into the function the cleaned headline or the cleaned text position I, whatever I is, right? And then this is going to return us 4 values. Okay. Or this function is going to return us 4 values and store it in SIA. Okay. So I like that. So here we're just getting the sentiment scores of the cleaned headlines. And let's start appending some of these values. So we are going to append the compound score to the list. So that's compound dot append, just like what they have here, SIA. And then we're going to get compound. So I like Google's suggestion here for all of these. I'm just going to tab over. Okay, because we're going to append neg to our neg list. We're going to append pos to our pos list, and new append is going to be SIA new. So I'm just going to tab over there. Okay, so we're getting our negative score, we're getting our positive score, and we're getting our neutral score. Okay, so I think that looks good. Let me add a comment at the top here and just put get the sentiment scores for each headline from the sentiment intensity analyzer. Say that 10 times fast. Okay. So I think that's it. Let's run the cell. All right, let's create a new one. Okay, so now we're going to add these to our data set. So add the sentiment scores to our data set. All right, so I'm going to create some new columns. One will be called compound, and guess what? It's going to be equal to our compound list. Another one will be called, oh, I like what Google suggested here. It's going to tab over. So another column will be called negative, and we're going to set it equal to our neg list. And then another one will be called positive. That'll be our next column called positive. And it's going to have values from our pos list. And the last but not least column will be called neutral, and it will have values from our new list. Okay. And then I want to show the data. So I'm going to type df.tail, and we're going to get the last 3 rows of data. Okay. So now our data set looks like this. And I think we're good to go to start visualizing this, to make some charts. Okay. So I like it. We have our subjectivity and polarity from our TextBlob, and then we have compound, negative, positive, and neutral scores from our sentiment intensity analyzer. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new cell. And now I'm going to create a distribution plot. So let's plot the distribution of sentiment scores using a histogram. Okay, so I'm gonna type plt dot figure, and I'm gonna give this a figure size or fig size equal to, let's do fig size equal to, I'm gonna do 10 by 6. Okay, and then I'm gonna type plt dot hist for histogram and put in df compound, and we'll have some bins. I'm just gonna tab over because Google has a lot of good suggestions here. I'm just gonna change a few things. So instead of 30 bins, we're gonna do 20 bins. And the x-axis label will be compound score. I'm good with that. The y-axis label will be called frequency. I'm good with that. And the plot will be called distribution of sentiment scores. I add distribution of compound sentiment scores and then plt.show. So let's go ahead and run this cell and let's see what it looks like. And there we go. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to add one more thing here. I'm going to add edge color. I'm going to set edge color equal to K. Okay, and I'm going to run this again. And there we go. So I think that looks really good. All right, and we can see a high frequency for a compound score of 0.00. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new cell. And this tells me that's probably going to be a lot of these headlines are pretty neutral. But let's continue. Let's create a bar chart of sentiment scores. So I'm going to create a variable called sentiment underscore counts. And I'm going to set this equal to df. Let's see, df. I'm going to do negative, neutral, and positive. I'm just going to tab over. And so sentiment counts is equal to df negative, neutral, positive dot sum. But instead of sum, I'm going to put mean. So this way I can get or calculate the average sentiment scores. Okay. All right. So I think that's good. Next, I'm going to type sentiment underscore counts dot plot. So I'm going to set kind equal to bar like Google had there. So we're going to have a bar chart and the figure size or fig size will be equal to 10 by 6. So I don't need that fig size below. And the color will be equal to, let's go with red, gray, and green. Okay. So red for negative, gray for neutral, and green for positive. All right, let's get rid of that there. All right, next, let's give this a label and a title and show it. I like all of this here. I'm just going to tab over for now. So the x-axis label will be not sentiment, it will be average sentiment scores. I'm sorry, that's going to be on the, okay, on the x-axis, it will be, I'm just going to X this or control exit. I'm going to cut it. So on the X label, I'm going to put sentiment. And then on the y-axis, it will be the average scores. So I'm just going to control V here. So I'm going to put average scores. Okay, and then the title, I will put average sentiment scores. So let me just make sure that's right. So y-axis will be average scores, x-axis will be the sentiment, and the title will be average sentiment scores. Okay, and then we're going to show the chart. So let's go ahead and run this cell. Okay, so these are the average scores here on the y-axis, and negative, neutral, and positive are the sentiments. And we can see the gray neutral sentiment here. And just like the histogram, there's a lot of neutral scores. And we can see that in these headlines, there's more negative headlines than there are positive headlines. But of course, the neutral headlines outweigh both. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new cell. And we're going to create one last plot. So we're going to create an interactive plot for sentiment analysis. All right, so I'm going to create a variable called fig. Oh, Google might have created what I want. I'm just going to tab over. So we're going to set fig equal to px dot. Oh no, this is not exactly what I want. So I'm just going to type it all out. Px dot scatter, because I want a scatter plot. And I'm going to put in our data set df, and then our x-axis will be the polarity. Our y-axis will be the subjectivity. Okay. Color will be equal to compound. That's our compound score. We're going to give this a title. So the title will be sentiment analysis of stock market headlines. Okay, and then the labels, when we hover over each point, will be polarity, colon, polarity. And then, let me see, I'm just going to tab over. Maybe Google is writing it out for me. Good. Yes, so it's going to be polarity, colon, polarity, subjectivity, colon, subjectivity, compound, colon. Instead of compound here, we're going to change it up just so you can kind of see how this works. And we're going to put sentiment score. Okay. All right. And now, yep, figure show. All right. We're good to go here. Let's go ahead and run this cell. And hopefully everything is good. And there we go. We have this pretty cool interactive chart. So title sentiment analysis of stock market headlines. On the y-axis, we have the subjectivity. And on the x-axis, we have the polarity. And we have all these points. And you can see when I hover over one of the points, we get our three labels: polarity, subjectivity, and our sentiment score, which is the compound. And you can see the color for compound here, right? So this yellowish color, is closer to 1, I assume, and the darker color is closer to 0. So let's see here. Yep. Okay. Or I said 0. I'm sorry. It's closer to -1, not 0. So the yellow is closer to 1, and the dark color is close to -1. So there we go. That's it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. That's the end of the video. And I also hope that it was very educational. I hope it was fun. And I hope it'll help you get started with your own sentiment analysis program. Again, we only used a small data set, about 140 rows of data. So it wasn't a lot of data, right? You're going to want a lot more, but it was still a good amount to kind of see how this works. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up as it helps out the channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button. And again, if you want the data set or just want to support the channel, or if you want the code, then you can get it all on Patreon at patreon.com/computerscience. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.